Imagine standing around a campfire. It is 50,000 BC. The sun just set. There is no Netflix, no smartphones. There is no existential dread about your work inbox. Just you, the crackling flames, and the thick, choking smoke blowing directly right into your face. Somewhere back then, one of your distant ancestors stared at that smoke and wondered, wait, what if I did that on purpose? This is the story of how humanity discovered smoking. Not cigarettes, not cigars, and not that guy outside your office whom you always end up chatting with for too long. We are talking about the very first time a human deliberately inhaled something burning, and why this might be the oldest habit our entire species has ever developed. Because here is the thing nobody tells you. Smoking did not start with tobacco. It did not start with colonial trade routes or Native American ceremonies or even agriculture. The urge to inhale smoke might actually be hardwired deep inside us, so deep that it predates human civilization entirely. And the evidence for this is truly mind-blowing. Let us start with fire, because before you can smoke anything, you need flames. Fire has been part of our human story for an incredibly long time. The oldest proven evidence of controlled fire used by our early ancestors dates back roughly 1 million years to a site called Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. Archaeologists found burnt plant ash and charred bone. This was no random forest fire, but a carefully managed campfire used deliberately inside that dark cave. Now, 1 million years ago, we were not even Homo sapiens yet. That was Homo Erectus, our early cousin with a smaller brain, a thicker brow, and absolutely zero desire to be told what to do with it. They sat around campfires just like us. They cooked, kept warm, and they huddled close in the dark, constantly inhaling smoke, day after day, for hundreds of thousands of years. Every early human, or hominid sitting near a fire breathed it in. It was unavoidable, totally constant. It was basically ultimate bad air quality, and no one had an app to check. But here is where it gets interesting. Some of that smoke was not just wood. Burn any organic plant matter, and you get more than carbon dioxide and vapor. You get a cocktail of compounds, depending on what you are burning. Some plants, when burned, release psychoactive compounds, alkaloids, terpenes, and chemicals interacting with our nervous system in ways that are, shall we say, noticeable. Put simply, some of our ancestors were definitely getting accidentally buzzed around the campfire. Did they think it was magic? They felt great. This is no fringe theory. Scientists have argued for decades that ancient humans in forested lands would have constantly breathed in the smoke of wild plants like cannabis, wild tobacco, and various entheogens growing naturally across Africa, Europe, and Asia. The human brain, as it happens, has receptors built specifically for cannabinoids, and they did not evolve because of cannabis. They run our endocannabinoid system, which controls our mood, our memory, and even appetite. But because they exist, it means when early humans first inhaled the smoke of a burning cannabis plant, their brain did not panic. It just said, "Oh, hello, I have been expecting you." And that very first accidental puff of psychoactive smoke beside a prehistoric campfire might be the real birth of smoking. No master plan, no big decision, just a happy accident repeated so many times that someone finally decided to do it on purpose. Think about that for a moment. The entire multi-trillion-dollar global tobacco industry, centuries of deep rituals, the shamanic traditions, those healing practices, our daily habits, all of it likely started because some exhausted hunter sat downwind of the wrong shrub and had an unexpectedly amazing evening. History is often beautiful in the most ridiculous ways, but here is where we must be careful about dates, because ancient humans smoking wild plants and humans purposely farming crops to smoke are two completely different stories. So, what does the archaeology actually reveal? The very earliest proof of deliberate cannabis use, like charred cannabis seeds found in spots showing intentional smoking, commies from ancient graves in the Pamir Mountains of Central Asia. Dating to 500 BC, researchers uncovered wooden braziers filled with rocks that were scorched next to residue from cannabis plants with high THC levels. This was not some wild hemp used for rope or seeds. This was the high-quality stuff, and it was tucked directly into a ritual grave. Around 500 BC. That is about 2,500 years ago. But here is the question nagging at the back of your mind right now. Does lacking older physical proof actually mean it did not happen sooner? Or does we just have not dug it up yet? Organic stuff like seeds and leaves, or plant fibers, rarely survives for thousands of years underground. We still find ancient stone tools from 3 million years ago because rock is practically indestructible. But a wooden pipe filled with dried herbs is totally gone in just a few centuries under standard burial conditions. A leather pouch of cannabis rotted back into the dirt long before an archaeologist ever showed up holding a trowel. So, the lack of proof in this case is absolutely not proof of its absence. We also have the famous Herodotus problem. Herodotus, the Greek historian writing back in the 5th century BC, described in incredible detail how the Scythians, a nomadic tribe from the Eurasian steppe, took what he called a vapor bath. They would pitch small, sealed tents, heat up rocks until they glowed, and toss cannabis seeds onto those rocks, then sit inside the tent breathing the smoke, and as the historian wrote, howling with absolute joy. For generations, scholars assumed he was exaggerating or misinterpreting what he witnessed. Then researchers started digging up Scythian tombs and finding, you guessed it, bronze incense burners, heated stones, and hemp residue, precisely what Herodotus described. The guy was just reporting what he saw. He wasn't exaggerating. If anything, he was underselling it. Now let's talk about tobacco, because it's what most people actually associate with smoking. It is a plant in the genus Nicotiana, and it's native to the Americas. This actually matters a lot, because it means tobacco was completely unknown to Old World civilizations Europe, Africa, and Asia until contact with the Americas in the late 15th century. When European explorers arrived in the Caribbean in 1492, they immediately noticed the locals doing something totally bizarre. Columbus himself wrote in his journal about seeing people walking around with small, glowing sticks, breathing in smoke from burning dried leaves, then blowing it back out through their noses and mouths. His crew was totally baffled, but also, within weeks, they tried it themselves, because of course they did. But tobacco use in the Americas is far, far older than 1492. Archaeological proof of tobacco, especially chemical residues in ancient pipes, dates all the way back to at least 3,500 years ago in the southeastern United States. Some experts think it goes back much further, maybe 10,000 years or more, linked to the early farming in the Amazon basin. And here is the thing about tobaccoing. Ancient America, it was not a casual hobby, not even close. It was deeply sacred. They used tobacco in sacred healing rituals, in communicating with the spirit world, and in binding peace treaties between tribes. Even blowing smoke on someone meant a blessing of deep connection and respect. So a shaman smoking wasn't having some casual cigarette break. He was opening a channel between our world and the divine. That smoke was seen as a living messenger, traveling through different realms, carrying prayers up to the sky, and bringing visions back down. That context really matters. It's why using tobacco was so carefully controlled and ritualized by native cultures for generations, literally thousands of years. If something is sacred, you treat it with ultimate respect. You don't just chain smoke while watching television. Smoking is just a casual, everyday habit, something you do on a quick work break or while waiting around for a boss, is mostly a modern European invention, and a pretty recent one at that. But let's go back even further, because there is a hidden chapter of this story that most have never heard. It might be the absolute oldest evidence of intentional smoking in the whole archaeological record. Back in 2019, scientists made a stunning discovery out in the Great Salt Lake Desert in Utah. They uncovered a hearth, an ancient cooking and heating fire, roughly 12,000 years old, containing seeds of Nicotiana attenuata, a wild tobacco species native to North America. Now, these weren't seeds that had just blown into the campfire. They were highly concentrated in a way that strongly suggested intentional use. This place actually predates any known pottery or smoking pipes found in the region by thousands of years. This pushed back the expected timeline for ancient tobacco use in the Americas by a massive margin. This raises a truly mind-boggling question. If early humans were throwing tobacco into fires 12,000 years ago, just to breathe the smoke, or for sacred rituals, or both, what were people across the rest of the world doing with their own mind-altering plants at that exact same time? Because 12,000 years ago, humans were everywhere, spreading across Africa, across Asia, Europe, and Australia. And the human urge to change our consciousness, to chase different mental states, is definitely not just an American thing. It is a deeply human one. Let me throw a wild theory at you that sounds crazy, but scientists take it very top. Anthropologists, the intoxication hypothesis. Here is how the theory goes. In almost every human culture we know of, people have sought ways to change how they feel. They drank fermented brews, ate trippy mushrooms, inhaled sacred smoke, chewed strange leaves, and swallowed seeds. This habit is so universal, so stubborn, and completely independent across different societies, that scientists think it is no accident. Ronald Siegel, a researcher at UCLA, argued in the 1980s that the craving for a high is a fourth basic drive, right beside hunger and sex, wired directly into the animal kingdom, not just a human habit. Wild elephants search for fermented marula fruit. Siberian reindeer are known for gobbling down psychedelic mushrooms and then drinking the urine of other reindeer who ate those mushrooms because the mind-altering compounds pass right through intact reindeer. Recycling mind-bending drugs in Siberia. Honestly, respect. The point is, if this drive to alter consciousness runs this deep and this old, it is completely reasonable to think that early humans, long before they ever domesticated a single plant, way before they had pottery, pipes, or any of the tools we usually connect with smoking, were actually intentionally exposing themselves to smoke from mind-altering plants because they had learned from experience that it shifted something inside their minds. Maybe they burned those plants intentionally during their ancient rituals. Maybe they chose campsite locations near specific plants for this exact reason. Maybe they figured out which smoke made you feel great and which made you feel like you were dying, which, with some plants, is a lesson that kills you once before you ever figure it out. It was trial and error, prehistoric style, incredibly high stakes, and occasionally flat-out fatal. But those who survived, they remembered, they told others, and passed it down through generations of wisdom that never got written down, but was lived. That is how most human knowledge worked for most of our history. Not libraries, not schools, lived experience, passed from mouth to ear, around a fire, out in the dark. Let's also look at something that rarely ever comes up in this conversation. Smoking as actual medicine. Long before it became a hobby, long before it was spiritual, it might have been medical. Take the Ebers Papyrus. One of the oldest ancient medical texts in the world, dates to ancient Egypt. Around 1550 BC, it describes medical treatments using the breathing in smoke from heated herbs, specifically for issues affecting the throat and lungs. This sounds incredibly backward from a modern viewpoint. You are saying the ancient Egyptians treated lung issues by breathing in smoke? Yes, they really did. And while that sounds crazy, get this, those specific herbs they used, like henbane and other aromatic plants, actually have real medicinal power when inhaled. The ancient Greeks used fumigation, using healing smoke regularly. Hippocrates, whose famous oath doctors take when they start practicing medicine, wrote about breathing in herbal vapors to treat various lung diseases and other sicknesses. Their logic actually made sense by ancient standards. Smoke goes straight to the lungs directly, so if a plant has healing powers, sending it via smoke makes perfect logical sense. Using lungs as a delivery system, inhaling medicine, we still do it today, with modern asthma inhalers and anesthetic gases or nebulizers. The method itself survived. The fire part, thankfully, mostly didn't. Ancient Indian Ayurvedic medicine, dating back over 3,000 years, describes an ancient practice called dhumapana, which literally meant smoke drinking, featuring inhaling healing botanical herbs using Pikes. Old texts detail exact plants, unique health conditions, plus preparations. None of this was random or improvised. It was a highly structured medical system with strict rules and centuries of deeply tested refinement. Look at ancient China, old Mesopotamia, classic Greece, or India. In almost every early society on record shows clear proof that people inhaled smoke on purpose for healing reasons as a standard, accepted treatment. Not to feed a bad habit, and not just to look cool, but because it actually worked. Well, at least some of the time. Or at least it helped enough times that they kept at it. And back then, in a world with no antibiotics or surgery, without any gear that modern doctors rely on today, working sometimes was a pretty high bar to clear. But here is a side of the story that rarely gets talked about, and it is all about deep social connection. We are intensely tribal creatures who evolved in clans, and group cohesion, their very ability to stick together as one, trusting each other, acting in sync, was literally a matter of life or death. Across most of our evolutionary history, lone wolves died, the pack survived, so anything boosting social bonds held massive evolutionary value. And shared rituals, including sharing these powerful substances together, are incredibly strong tools for building trust. Think about it. When a group shares, and sharing an altered state together creates a deep, shared connection of trust and mutual understanding that is tough to copy any other way. Modern neuroscience actually confirms this. Shared rituals synchronize our neural activity, boost trust, and deepen group identity in measurable, proven ways. So when our ancient ancestors sat together in closed-off spaces breathing in smoke from burning cannabis or sacred herbs, and together entered an altered state, it wasn't just recreational. That was social technology. That's how you forge that deep trust and group connection that let you enter dangerous situations and still come back alive. That tribal smoke circle wasn't a party. It was vital infrastructure. Here is where we hit the uncomfortable truth of this story. Moving from that sacred smoke to a casual habit was a total disaster. When tobacco first hit Europe in the 16th century, it spread so fast. That might sound a bit familiar. Within decades, smoking went from a rare curiosity to a massive, continental obsession. By the 1600s, tobacco was traded globally. By the 1700s, snuff-powdered tobacco sniffed right up the nose was all the rage among European elites. By the 1800s, cigars ruled. By the early 1900s, industrial cigarette machines had been invented, making smoking so much cheaper, easier, and far more addictive than anything seen before. What took indigenous Americans thousands of years to weave into a sacred, slow, and deeply cultural ritual was, once in European hands, twisted into a massive, global consumer product in just 4 centuries. Then, 20th century big tobacco giants spent decades and billions of dollars hiding the proof that smoking caused cancer, proof that their own scientists had already compiled. They literally marketed to children. They paid off doctors to promote cigarettes. They pumped in chemicals designed to make nicotine hit faster and harder, then leave the body quicker, making it incredibly addictive. They took an ancient, communal spiritual ritual and built a product engineered to be as biologically destructive and as incredibly financially draining as possible. A tribal shaman and a corporate executive used the exact same plant. They had basically nothing else in common. Think of a shaman in 500 BC burning cannabis on hot stones for a sacred burial versus a 1960 tobacco executive approving ads targeted straight at teenagers is one of the deepest moral divides in human history. Both involve smoke that absolutely nothing else matches. So, when did our ancestors start smoking? The truth is, we just do not know. And we probably never will. The physical clues only go back 12,000 years with real confidence, and probably way further with some reasonable guessing. What actually drives us to inhale? That basic urge to alter our minds, to share ritual experiences, to use healing plants as medicine, is almost certainly older than any relic we've ever found. It could be as old as fire itself, maybe as old as that mental leap that made us human in the first place. Just connecting simple cause and effect. Looking at a burning bush and thinking, hey, last time that happened, I felt different. Let's do that again. That's not addiction, that's pure intelligence. But here is what we know. This habit is incredibly old. It came way before farming, it predates pottery. And every ancient civilization you've ever studied in school. What is totally clear is that by the time our written history begins, in every corner of the world, people were already finding ways to puff smoke into their bodies. The specific plants changed, the sacred rituals shifted, the reasons evolved, but the behavior, the habit, was already ancient before anyone even thought to write it down. There's something beautifully poetic about that. Despite all the things that separate modern folks from our early ancestors, the tech, the medicine, high-speed internet, and that baffling amount of content we scroll through daily, there are these thin threads of connection running unbroken through 100,000 years of life, fire, smoke, breath. Ancient humans sat around fires and breathed the exact same smoky air you'd catch at a backyard bonfire tonight. Some point, we actually asked ourselves, why not inhale that wild smoke? And so we started actively choosing it, then passing that bizarre habit right down to our kids and their own kids. All the way to those Scythians howling with joy inside their tents, and those Egyptian doctors prescribing toxic herbs, and Mayan shamans seeking visions in rising smoke, or Taino people on a Caribbean beach watching bewildered Europeans try tobacco for the first time, coughing until their eyes watered. Either way, next time you flip a switch, or sit near a campfire, or catch that wood smoke smell on a chilly night, you share in something incredibly ancient. You are doing exactly what humans have always done, just breathing.